Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books and marketing expert covering Bud Light distributors very upset as beer sales never recovered. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. Coming from ABC News, Bud Light boycott still hammers local distributors 1 year later. Quote, very upsetting. Sales cratered and sat there, according to an industry analyst. Sales have not returned to Bud Light. Sales can't possibly return to Bud Light because Bud Light used to be a beer that everyone could drink. There were no negative social implications or questions that people would ask about you or your sexuality or identity or your political standing. It just used to be something everyone might enjoy. It wasn't a great beer. It never was a great beer. It was just a beer that people drank when they hung around, and you'd see it at barbecues. You'd see it all over the place until the Dylan Mulvaney promotion. Well, they call it a boycott. It really wasn't a boycott. It was a complete redefinition of what it meant to drink Bud Light. They decided to push an agenda, and then they found out that, no, people don't want to be part of that agenda. And more companies are starting to find that out. From Vox, your favorite brand no longer cares about being woke. Following the Bud Light backlash and inflation fears, the revolution will not be advertised. Ad week going back to 2016, after Trump won the election, the first time, Ad week pushed this ridiculous headline: why it's critical brands take a stand on tough social issues. Marketers must have courage in the face of controversy. Courage is not taking your brand and changing the definition of it so that if you associate with it, you're now part of a different political group. It's never been a good idea. It was never going to work. It never made any sense. If they sneak in slight changes with the associations with their brand and their marketing, people are generally okay with it. They're annoyed by it. They know they can get away with that. They've been doing that for years. However, like when Gillette pushed their agenda too far and decided they wanted to attack men and call all men toxic, it severely damaged Gillette. Same thing goes for Bud Light. Same thing goes for Target. Same thing goes for Disney. Whoever has tried it has now found out that, no, you can't just push that hard on consumers and expect them to still support your product or service. People just straight out reject it. And in the case of Bud Light, unfortunately, it's the independent distributors. There are 500 or so independent distributors, privately owned, that have lost a tremendous amount of business and can't get that business back. They got a little bit of help from Anheuser-Busch. Anheuser-Busch spent a little bit of money, but they really did nothing to replace the lost business. And all of the money they're spending on marketing, all the money they're spending on co-promotional deals with the UFC and with the NFL, it's not working. What they should do, but they're afraid to do, is go straight at the problem and do sexy girl promotional advertising again. Like this kind of advertising with some pretty girl wearing a Bud Light shirt. Viral videos, recreating the Dylan Mulvaney video, but with a beautiful girl, with a sexy girl, instead of a guy in a dress. That's the core issue. That's the core identity. They don't want to have a sexy beer brand anymore, and that's what's killed them. From ABC News, when conservative activists set aflame boxes of Bud Light and urged a boycott in response to an endorsement from transgender influencer Dylan Mulvaney, they sent sales of the beer plummeting in a rare success in the long history of consumer movements. Even more improbably, the backlash continues to hammer Bud Light and strain independent local wholesalers more than a year later. According to third-party sales data shared with ABC News, as well as interviews with 6 Anheuser-Busch wholesalers. Most of the wholesalers, small and medium-sized businesses that drew a significant portion of their revenue from Bud Light, said they remain weakened by the decline in sales and uncertain about when, if ever, the brand will fully recover. The owner of an Anheuser-Busch wholesaler in the Northeast, whose child is trans, told ABC News they've taken a 30% pay cut to make up for the losses and are considering retirement. Quote, it was really hurtful personally, the owner said. I'm trying to understand what my kid is going through, and then this happens. Well, this is what your kid is going through. This isn't really realistic and viable to think that you're going to take a mainstream product like Bud Light and now turn it into a trans person beer. I mean, you can do that, but what you're going to do is destroy most of the customer base for your market, because now instead of something everyone could enjoy, it's really only a beer for people that want to jump into a bathtub with Dylan Mulvaney. And realistically, that's a much smaller number of people. Quote, it's still very upsetting, the owner added, noting that the company's Bud Light sales declined by 50% in the immediate aftermath of the boycott. Which, by the way, when they were reporting sales declines, we knew some of those sales declines were 50%, 80%. In the mass media, they never reported that. I've covered this subject pretty closely. I did more than 100 videos on the Bud Light situation. Every twist, every turn, I covered it on the channel. You can see it on the Bud Light playlist. I spoke to Bump Williams, who's the key consultant that everybody goes to when they talk about this story in mass media. He gave me some of his internal thoughts. I covered as much of that as possible in the videos. He sent me regular weekly reports showing the sales declines. I followed it very closely, but nowhere were you having distributors publicly saying they lost 50% in the immediate aftermath of the boycott. They never admitted a number like that. Quote, it's very difficult to come in every day and look at those sales numbers knowing I have a responsibility for everyone here. Yeah, your business is essentially ruined if you depended on Bud Light. Another executive at a wholesaler in the Mid-Atlantic said they've spent sleepless nights devising ways to shed costs without laying off employees. And a top official at a distributor in the Southeast said they expect sales of Bud Light will remain down for at least 2 more years. And that's one of the things you see with small businesses. I have a small business as well, other than the YouTube channel. And I have a tremendous loyalty to the people who work with me. I always want to make sure I have enough work for them, no matter what's going on. And I plan the business that way. Even if I didn't want that business anymore, I'd stay in that business just to make sure that those people always had work if that's what they wanted. I'm extremely loyal. And I get a lot of that loyalty in return when I find a good employee. Big companies don't think this way, where they're like, oh, how are we going to keep people on staff now that we've lost all this business? Big companies tend to have more of the attitude of like, look, I don't know who this person is. I don't care who this person is. Cut them, get rid of them. Now, even though the Bud Light brand is pretty much destroyed, it can't grow. It can never even get back to where it was before. It doesn't matter what the population of the United States ever is. If the population triples in the United States, they will never get back to the numbers that they used to have. However, mass media will try to put a positive spin on it, and here's the most positive they can make it sound. Still, the wholesalers added, harassment of employees and drinkers has faded, indicating the boycott fervor has died down, and the brand reputation of Bud Light has begun to mend. So, because no one's really out there harassing their employees or harassing drinkers who are crazy enough to drink Bud Light in public, that's their big win. Many of the wholesalers said sales had improved lately, and Bud Light remains their top-selling beer. Top-selling beer by volume, not by revenue. The wholesalers requested anonymity because they didn't want to be publicly identified speaking about the financial consequences of the boycott. In all, roughly 500 independent distributors sell Anheuser-Busch products nationwide. Anheuser-Busch is also a very tyrannical company. I've seen a number of distributors comment that they're kind of afraid of Anheuser-Busch, even still, because while Anheuser-Busch has cost them a fortune of money, they still depend on Anheuser-Busch. And Anheuser-Busch has no problem with threatening their independent distributors. In response to ABC News' request for a comment, a spokesperson at Anheuser-Busch touted the success of Bud Light and the company's relationship with wholesalers. Quote, Bud Light continues to be the #1 selling beer brand in the country because for decades it has been synonymous with programs and activations that consumers love, including partnerships with the NFL, NHL, UFC, and college football, the spokesperson said. As we have for nearly a century, we continue to work side by side with our 350 plus wholesaler partners. It's actually like 500, but somebody should tell them that, to drive growth for our collective business and provide best-in-class service to our consumers and retailers across the country. Sales of Bud Light declined by roughly 25%, the number is actually 30%, over the weeks following a product endorsement from Dylan Mulvaney, a transgender influencer which sparked backlash among many conservatives and normal people last April. All of this according to data from Bump Williams Consulting and Nielsen NIQ. In a video posted on Instagram, Mulvaney held a specially designed can of Bud Light featuring an illustration of him. The can, Mulvaney said, included a message congratulating him on his 365 days of, they say, womanhood. But it wasn't womanhood. It was girlhood. That was what was even more disturbing. This turned into some kind of an underage, weird vibe type of thing. Mainstream media is trying to change history a little bit. It's not 365 days of womanhood. Check out this article from Rolling Stone during that time. This was from March 14th, 2023. Backstage with TikTok star Dylan Mulvaney, 1 year into girlhood. The trans singer and dancer just celebrated her 365th day as a girl with an over-the-top review, and she put on one hell of a show. Well, that's their agenda. That's what they're pushing. And that's what they're trying to hide, the 365 days of girlhood. Of course, there's no 365 days of girlhood. You're either born a girl or you're not. But for the fact that they're trying to hide what happened and change some of the language, it tells you how badly pushing this agenda actually went. It didn't work. It completely flopped. And it's not just with conservative people and normal people. Nobody really was interested in, or accepted any of this nonsense. Until April of this year, sales of the beer stayed stuck at the same level while the boycott persisted, Dave Williams, the president of Bump Williams Consulting, told ABC News. Quote, sales cratered and sat there. They didn't get any worse, but they sure as heck didn't get any better, Williams said. I don't think there are a lot of examples where the king of the castle, someone in such prominence, took such a public and drastic hit in beer. Budweiser used to be the king of beers. Not no more. Now it's the queen of beers? Maybe. In recent months, sales have shown signs of improvement, but remain well below pre-boycott levels, Williams added, noting that some customers appear to have returned to the brand as the social stigma has waned, while others remain steadfast in their opposition. Quote, the goal is to retain the consumers that they have and hopefully try to win some back. They're not going to win nearly anybody back. Why would anybody buy that beer when they can buy something else? Makes no sense. An executive at a wholesaler in the Southeast said Bud Light sales plummeted by at least 20% in the aftermath of the boycott and remained at that level for the rest of 2023. The blow to the balance sheet hurt company morale and raised questions about the firm's future, the executive said. This is one of the things that makes me most angry about this situation. Quote, we've got employees who expected a career helping to build this brand and this business, the executive added. To have that undone was a bit of a shock, to say the least. Destroying people's careers, destroying people's lives, over trying to push a ridiculous agenda which they've yet to directly, appropriately apologize for. Yes, there was a CEO of one of their European divisions that kind of sort of apologized. Nowhere near at the level that they should have. When they apologize appropriately, you'll know it. And if you ever see them return to appropriate marketing again, which is to push the sexiness and the fun of what used to be their beer brand, then you'll know they're actually trying to get back on track. Whether or not they win customers back, I can't say. I don't think they would. But at the very least, they're not trying until they do that again. In recent months, hostility toward the brand has faded. Sales have stabilized and morale has improved, the executive added, while acknowledging that sales still stand well below pre-boycott levels. But once a consumer drops off a product where there's a readily available and similarly priced substitute, a habit is formed, and it's difficult to shake that habit, the executive said. We have to give them a reason to come back. Some wholesalers expressed optimism about Bud Light's outlook and praised Anheuser-Busch for providing financial support in response to the sales slump. That financial support was incredibly limited. They also downplayed the boycott's impact, attributing much of the sales decline to a wider shift away from beer to other alcoholic drinks. The enduring impact of the Bud Light boycott defies a decades-long history of largely ineffective consumer boycotts, according to Marie Schweitzer, a professor at the University of Wharton School of Business who studies consumer movements. But the problem was this wasn't really a consumer movement. This was an attack on the consumer. And then the consumer said, okay, no, I don't want to have anything to do with this. Even though with discounts and rebates, some Bud Light beer was free. It was cheaper than water. And they still couldn't get consumers to take the beer. She went on to say, the continued struggle of Bud Light owes to the easy availability of similar products as well as the highly polarized political environment nationwide. Quote, given the history of boycotts and its history of ineffectiveness, it is really surprising that this one has had the staying power that it has. She continues, in this moment, we're so politicized. The weather is political, the employment rate is political, and now beer is political. Well, that's not the fault of normal people. Normal people didn't want politics in our consumer products or in the weather or in employment data. We just wanted people to treat others normally. We wanted products that we could buy based on the value of the product, not based on whether or not we're part of some social agenda to change people's genders. The people at the big companies, the people in government that decided they wanted to push these kinds of agendas, and consumers didn't even push back. They just walked away from those products. Target saw it happen. Disney saw it happen. And Bud Light saw it happen. Keep your politics out of our products, or we're not going to buy them. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications, give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another story. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.